It's 2007, an autumn afternoon in Tokyo. Work for the day is about to end as the sun sets earlier and earlier with each passing day. Each day in turn is but one more step towards the frigid winter. Two Nintendo EAD Tokyo employees, Yoshiaki Koizumi and Hideaki Shimizu, just finished work on Super Mario Galaxy, a masterpiece years in the making. They decided to do a bit of a after-school project in secret. They decided to start messing around with a Nintendo DS and Wii in their free time, making an app that could display an animation from a DS on the big screen. In just a couple days, they had a prototype. In just a couple months, Nintendo officially released this. I'm sure a fair number of you who clicked on this video already knew this story. For Zoomers who love to wax poetic about 2000s Nintendo, Flipnote Studio is the company's quirkiness incarnate. It's essentially a piece of frame-by-frame animation software two guys made, well, just because. This tidbit has become a bit of a piece of mythology for internet lovers to pass around, and for good reason. For the starry-eyed children that grew up with Flipnote, myself included, and were introduced to animation through it, it is a reminder of the beautiful things that can be made by just goofing off for a little bit of time. The thing is, though, that's actually nothing new. Flipnote Studio was essentially a self-imposed charette. It's an exercise used frequently among artists and designers to stimulate their creative thinking. Essentially, the idea is to make something that could be considered finished in a concise, intense period of time. The term originates from the École des Beaux-Arts, since students would often frantically be finishing their projects before they would get picked up in a cart, or charette in French, to be graded. As a design student and semi-regular victim of charettes, I mention this because Flipnote has the eccentric, sketchy energy of the practice written all over it. It's so obvious, for instance, in all of the allusions to cheap stationery. It's all very well vernacular. It represents the art of the common man. Art in Flipnote Studio revolves around the all-too-common artistic trinity of the pencil, brush, and eraser. Though the stylus and screen are plastic, little scratchy sounds play to give the impression that a pencil really is hitting the paper page. These sound effects are what give Flipnote its soul. While the app is mostly silent, every button press peppers your ears with a discreet and silly sound effect. It's charming, but it never really comes off as childish. It's also a good way to describe the UI. It continues the skeuomorphic feel of the sound design by having all the tools you need neatly laid out, evoking the idea of a forever fresh and crisp work desk on your Nintendo DSi. All of the buttons are just loud and spunky orange. The font on them, though uniform and clean, evokes a sketchiness of rebellious 90s fonts like Garage Gothic and Template Gothic. The background of everything is actually not a pure white. It's laced with this subtle grid pattern, making it look like a piece of, well, graph paper. Let's talk about this background for a moment. It obviously fits in with the whole app's very sketchpad-like design, but it also alludes to how everything is organized. Everything is laid out in these neat rectangles to make everything look like an idealized, tidy desk space. This is all pretty standard. The virtues of the grid have been preached about since the days of Theo van Doesburg and Jan Tischel in the 1920s. What isn't is how this grid-based design is translated into everything being super pixelated. Flipnote Studio is known for its incredibly rough brushes. Any line work drawn on the program looks extremely pixelated because there's no anti-aliasing on the edges at all. Part of this can probably be attributed to the console's extremely low resolution and overall graphical power, but there's a bit more at play. Take a look at this font used for secondary text in Flipnote Studio. It's actually very similar to this font, Emperor, made by the typographer Zuzana Licko in 1984. It's unique in being designed with the then new Apple Macintosh computer. It was designed with bitmap technology in mind, meaning that each individual pixel on the screen could either be filled or not filled with a color. Emperor and other bitmap fonts like it are essentially fonts made with the building blocks of computer graphics. As a result, they wear their computeriness on their sleeves, if you even could do that. Because of the similar chunky bitmapping on display, every Flipnote has a similar heritage to Emperor. It is unabashedly digital. Every rough edge reminds you that you are drawing on an incredibly low-res screen, but nevertheless you can draw things in much the same way as on paper. It's loose, it's rough, it suggests a spur of the moment, but nevertheless it can be used to create elegant and clean art given the right care and dedication. So there's a bit of a contradiction here. Why does Flipnote go to such great lengths to give the appearance of a sketchpad, when everything you draw looks like this? Well, simply put, it's following in a tradition of skeuomorphic design that had been and continues to be in computers for years. One of the key examples is the original Macintosh itself, which had these lovely sets of icons designed by Susan Kare that show important computer-related alerts and actions with objects that have physical analogs in the real world. The reason why I've been talking about the Macintosh so much is not because of the product itself, but rather what it meant for designers. The limitation of the bitmap became grounds for a style in and of itself, one that embraced the computer as a building block for designs rather than a pencil or metal type. Licko and her husband, Rudy Vanderlands, founded the Emigre Digital Type Foundry, after a magazine that they previously founded, in 1985, which produced many more bitmap fonts and explores the limits of digital typography to this day. Licko and Greiman's Doesn't Make Sense, Design Quarterly number 133, provides us a striking example of the embrace of bitmaps, using the seemingly primitive dots to construct a grandiose timeline of human existence through the perspective of the female body. The 1990s gave way to vector graphics, which used fancy equations that enabled objects to be scaled at any size. Yet, as noted by Professor Peter Bartle of the University of Alberta, this style was here to stay. He frames the signature coarseness of the bitmap, the jaggies, as a mark of this new revolution. The jaggies became a vernacular symbol for high-tech avant-garde designers. Licko and Greiman still uses them as a style mark, selectively denying the high resolution of her equipment behind the low-tech look. More important, that primitive trend in design is supported by a whole new generation of young, enthusiastic type designers. Best known among them in North America is Zuzanna Licko, the designer of the Emigre typefaces. A curious twist to our aesthetic history, but not really surprising, since once again, what is ugly to one generation becomes beautiful to the next. There is a day in Flipnote's history that parallels the supposed death of the jaggies. May 31st, 2013. That was the shutdown of the Flipnote Hatena service, a vibrant community where people from around the world could share their Flipnotes with each other. I recall this feeling like the end of an era when it happened, and I never even used Hatena. I worried because I thought that Flipnote would become obsolete. For as much as I loved the charm, the simple elegance of using the software, I thought that there was no reason to use it, and it was time to move on to less fun and frankly more frustrating alternatives like Adobe Flash in order to be taken seriously. But looking back, I realized that Flipnote never became irrelevant. It never died. It now stands as a vernacular symbol, like Bartle commented about the signature bitmap style. It is a symbol that is a reflection of how it was made, by the dedication of two talented game designers deciding to make something for no other reason other than they thought it would be fun. It is a charette that encourages others to take part in their own charettes. Ones that perhaps are rushed, imperfect, but nevertheless beautiful, because they exist. When I look at that frog on the DSi menu, I no longer see a relic of a dated past that can only be recovered by watching old YouTube compilations. I see an invitation into the future.